So you're an investor in real property and you're asking yourself, how can I know whether I'm operating at the next level? How do I know if I'm actually a professional landlord? I'm going to talk about 4 areas that you can evaluate in your own practice that'll indicate to you whether you are a landlording hobbyist or a landlording pro. Let's get started. So one thing I like to point out when I talk about professional landlording is other areas of professionalism. Specifically, I like to draw the analogy of the professional athlete. If you played high school ball of any kind or participated in any kind of sport in high school, you probably know the rigors that were involved in being competitive on that level. For those of you who took the next step and participated on the collegiate level, you understand that it's a different playing field and the world is different in terms of what's required to be successful on that level. And even fewer of you took the step from the collegiate level to the professional level to compete among the professional athletes that exist in the world, and you know better than most exactly what it takes to be a pro in whatever athletic endeavor you undertook. But I think all of us have some understanding that it takes a special person to rise through the ranks to get from amateur to professional. And so when it comes to landlording, there's a few things that really distinguish whether you're operating on one level or the other, and today we're going to talk about those. I think it's important to understand the mindset of a hobbyist. If you are a hobbyist when it comes to certain other things in your life, maybe board games or bird watching or collecting of some sort, as a hobby, you don't mind spending money. In fact, you don't mind losing money on an endeavor because the activity itself is fun. And so you don't count it as money lost when you don't actually gain financially from that thing that you refer to as a hobby. But if you're operating as a real estate professional, you expect from this profession to yield some kind of gain, some kind of profit. In fact, you expect that every dollar you invest yields more than that dollar coming out. And if it's not doing that, there's a problem. You gotta change something. You gotta redefine something. You have to alter your method in order to get a return from your investment. In terms of money, that's one distinction between the hobbyist and the professional. Are you actually earning anything? Now, for those of you who are getting value out of today's video, I trust that you will hit that like button and just show us how much you appreciate this. If you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and subscribe. Any questions or comments, leave them for me below. I answer and review every single one of them with helpful information for you. Thanks so much. When I talk to landlords about them entering property or what they feel about going into property, or when I hear landlords talk to me about the difficulty of entering property, it lets me know very quickly whether they're operating on a hobbyist level or on a professional level. If I get a landlord who is hesitant to enter or who has had difficulty entering, particularly over a long period of time, I can tell right from the start that I'm probably dealing with someone who's not quite reached the professional level yet. You see, a landlord hobbyist doesn't know his lease well enough to understand exactly what his rights are, is not familiar with the law well enough to know when he is able to go on the property and when he is not able to go on the property. A landlording hobbyist really lets the tenant make all the decisions with regard to how or when or if the landlord will ever go and inspect the property. And in the worst cases, the landlord who is a hobbyist never actually visits the property during the tenancy. They hand the keys over at the beginning and take the keys over at the end. And whether that's 12 months or 36 months, the landlord makes no effort when they're a hobbyist to inspect the property while the tenant is in possession. A professional landlord, on the other hand, knows that they are going to be on the property at least 2 times within any 12-month period. Now, this is in conjunction with or in addition to the call for a repair. The inspection is there at least twice a year to make sure you can avoid repair costs, particularly extensive ones. I don't know how many times I've had hobbyist landlords who'll come to me and say, man, I had to spend so much money on maintenance or repair of an AC because my tenant was there for more than 2 years and never once changed the air filter. And my question to them is always, well, why didn't you? How come you didn't get out there even once to inspect the property to make sure that some of these basic things were being taken care of? Well, I don't know. And it's usually because they didn't have the expectation that the tenant would be this negligent. So part of professional landlording is understanding that sometimes, in fact, often the tenant isn't going to take care of the property as well as you would. Most tenants just don't have that in mind. Most tenants are going to do the minimum required of them, and that's about it. Very few of them are going to go above and beyond and do things you didn't ask or never enforced, or will leave the property in a better condition than they found it. Most of the time, it will be worse. Now, if it's simply from normal use and normal wear and tear, that's fine. But in this case, not changing a filter for over 2 years is negligence on you, the landlord. And so by going onto the property at least twice a year, you're going to prevent some of these things from happening. And by doing that, you're going to save money on future repairs. Now, when it comes to repairs, the hobbyist is going to panic whenever some big problem comes up. They're going to go through Google, they're going to go through their notes, they're going to scour the world quickly for someone who can respond to some big repair that has to be done fast. But a professional landlord has already got somebody on their cell phone. They've already used them before. They have experience with their work. They know exactly what they're going to charge, and they don't panic even when a major repair comes up. A landlording hobbyist undertakes the simple things all by themselves. If it's simple, I can handle it. Or if I've never done it before, I'll figure it out and I'm going to save myself a few bucks. Now, the professional landlord knows if it's not in my wheelhouse, if I'm not able to produce a good product when it comes to my own repair, then I don't touch my own repair. If I myself cannot do tip-top professional work, then I'm going to hire somebody who can, because the thing you want to protect isn't the convenience of the tenant, it's the value of your rent asset. And if you can't do that, you're just not operating on a professional level. Additionally, by doing things on your own, or worse, letting the tenant do the repair and hoping that they do it right, you're setting yourself up for future costs, either because the repair was not done well or it wasn't done at all and it got worse. By not handling repair issues in a professional way, you end up spending more money, even though at the onset you thought you were saving yourself a buck or two. By having a list of good quality people who you can trust, who you can call, even on short notice, people who you've worked with before in the past, you're going to save yourself so much money, and you're going to build wealth in the process. Because you don't want an asset that depreciates in value over time. You only ever want an asset that's going to increase in value over time. And by maintaining a well-maintained property, you're going to get that exact thing. By letting your property fall into disrepair, or by cutting corners when you didn't have to, you're going to end up losing money in the long run. Now, because we know that one of your major goals is actually turning a profit, it's important to know how you collect money from your tenants. And if you're doing this poorly, you're probably not collecting as much as you can. In fact, you may be losing money. The hobbyist is satisfied with the rent whenever it's paid. The hobbyist says, well, at least they paid it. Sure, it was 20 days late, but at least they paid it. And that mindset itself condones and allows for really bad business practices. You're condoning late payment, you're condoning violation of your lease, and you're doing nothing about it because you are satisfied with that level of performance from your tenant. Instead, a professional landlord is going to say, the rent is due on the 1st, and unless I have it all by date X, I'm issuing a notice to vacate. And if I do get rent late, I'm issuing a notice of late payment. By requiring that tenants actually pay their rent on time, you're going to find that professional landlords actually get their rent on time. For professional landlords, you're going to find that they just don't worry as much about late payment or non-payment, mostly because by dealing effectively with these things, they prevent tenants from paying late or just not paying at all. They don't let the snowball effect occur of 1 month of non-payment turning into 2, turning into 3, turning into 6. Instead, they deal with these things quickly and effectively and prevent it from ever getting out of control. When it comes to late fees, the hobbyist feels guilty. The hobbyist feels like it's mean to enforce the late fee provision. The hobbyist feels good about letting things slide and being the cool landlord. But a professional landlord knows that the enforcement of late fees isn't about being mean, and it isn't even about making an extra buck. Mostly, it's about enforcing the rules and letting the tenant know that they agreed to this late fee, and if they ever pay later than is required under the lease when late fees can accrue, that not only will you collect them, but you're also going to issue a notice. By making sure that you stick to these guidelines, you show yourself to be a professional landlord, and your tenant will respond in this way, usually better than in the other. By letting the tenant over and over and over just pay whenever, you're going to find yourself in a situation, again, more likely than with the other guy, where your tenant just pushes the envelope and pushes the envelope and pushes the envelope, because the truth is stuff comes up, and if rent's not a priority to you, it's not going to be a priority to them, especially when things go badly. And the truth is, things will go badly. So as a professional landlord, you have to be on top of your notice distribution. It's not good enough to have a stern talking to with your tenant. It's not good enough to have sent a text to your tenant. You're always going to want to issue written notice to your tenant in a way that can effectively be proven in a court of law if you have to present that notice there. And you should always assume that any written notice that you're giving will eventually end up as evidence in a court. A professional landlord always drafts notice in that way, with a professional presentation at trial in mind before it ever happens. By preparing your notices in such a way, your tenant is likelier to obey them. If, for example, your tenant breaks a window and you go in and you create that repair, you issue a bill and the tenant hasn't paid the bill, you're going to want to issue a notice of non-compliance, a notice of violation. Not only are they in violation for the damaged property, but if they haven't paid for the repair, they're in violation of your lease for not covering their own damages due to negligence. Remember, a broken window typically isn't broken through normal use or ordinary wear and tear. So because the tenant's negligence was involved, you can charge them for that repair. If your tenant is paying late or has an unauthorized pet, has an unauthorized occupant, or perhaps broke a myriad of other non-rent related issues that come up in your lease, you should each time be issuing some kind of written notice informing the tenant that they have to fix whatever violation they've committed, or if they repeatedly violate this or any other term in the lease, they are subject to eviction. By issuing these notices and ultimately issuing a notice to vacate when the tenant has crossed that line, you are establishing for that tenant just exactly how far you're willing to go. The same is true from the hobbyist who never issues these things. If you never issue a written notice or never give a warning, you're telling your tenant you're willing to take it over and over and over again. You send an improper message about the way the lease should be regarded when you yourself do not highly regard the terms in your lease. By enforcing those terms and issuing notice of violation and mentioning that repeated violation will result in eviction, or in the case of non-payment, you really just need that one time. If you go more than 7 days without payment, go ahead and issue a notice to vacate and let the tenant know that this is not an acceptable practice, that if they get to this point, you will issue that notice to vacate. In fact, the professional landlord will always inform the tenant well ahead of any violation exactly how they will respond to violations, with written notice and ultimately notice to vacate, to terminate the lease and move on. And the importance of, number one, issuing the notice, and number two, sticking to the game plan, particularly that which you have shared with your tenant, is that you're less likely to see this behavior, to see these violations, if they already know how you are going to respond. In fact, if you ever have to respond in this way, they're less likely to repeat it. But if they do repeat it and you do instigate an eviction based on it, you're going to be better off by getting rid of someone sooner rather than later, incurring less damage as opposed to more, because that's the best way for you to run your business. If you are a professional, you're going to hold your tenants to a professional standard. If you're a hobbyist, you're going to let tenants do whatever it is they want, and I guarantee you that's not in line with your money-making goals. So for those of you who are interested in continuing to learn more about professional landlording, there's a video right here that YouTube seems to think is perfect for you. Watch that and the rest of the content we have on this channel. I appreciate you taking your time. And until next time, landlords, happy leasing.